Hi there. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everyone can see and hear me okay. If you can't, just say something in the chat and we'll try to get something worked out. Um, my name's Erin and I'm a special agent with ALE. I just wanted to kind of introduce myself a little bit. I know there was a little bio that got sent out, but I've been with ALE for a few years, and before that, I was with Cumberland County Sheriff's Office. And so today I just am going to talk just a little bit about underage drinking and some of the things that can happen, and maybe some questions I hope that you guys have and maybe haven't had really the place to have them answered, or haven't known what to ask. And so hopefully this takes a little bit of the mystery out of it. And I am going to also send my contact information out. So if you have any questions moving forward, there will be some time after I talk to ask some questions, to put it in the chat or anything like that. And I'm happy to answer any of those. But maybe if you don't feel comfortable asking a question, or maybe you think of one later, feel free to send me an email or call me, and I'd be happy to answer those questions moving forward as well. So usually when I talk to people, I usually ask them to raise their hands if they've ever interacted with ALE or know about ALE. But obviously that's not really feasible in a setting like this. So I just want to say a little bit about ALE, because maybe you guys have never heard of ALE or don't even know what ALE even stands for. So it's a state agency, alcohol law enforcement, and we are a sworn law enforcement agency, and we are actually the lead law enforcement agency for alcoholic beverage control, lottery, and tobacco laws. So that's really our bread and butter. That's what we focus on. But we also do drug investigations, prostitution, money laundering, things like that. So we really have a wide base of what we deal with, but the main things are the alcoholic beverage control laws, lottery, and tobacco laws. And we enforce that all over the state, but mainly on ABC licensed premises. So that's anywhere that sells alcohol. That's everywhere from convenience stores and grocery stores and Walmart, and but also bars and clubs and stuff like that. So but obviously part of that is underage drinking. And so we have about 108 special agents throughout the state. So we're a pretty small agency. And that's total sworn. And so that's including like our headquarters and our supervisors. So as far as agents that are kind of boots on the ground, we're about 70 to 80 agents. So we're pretty small. And but really what our main focus is targeting violence and illegal activity on these ABC licensed and non-licensed premises. So again, if you have more questions about what ALE does, again, I'm happy to talk about that as well at a later time. So I just kind of was thinking about some questions that I feel like that I had when I was underage, and I didn't know the answer to them, and I wish that someone had talked to me about them and had kind of taken some of the mystery out of it for me. So so I'm just going to throw out a few questions and kind of answer them, and then hopefully that will maybe spark some questions or some curiosity that you have as well. So how do you know if you've had too much to drink? So there's not an exact science. It's not A plus B equals C. There are some general rules, but it's not exactly. So I can't say, oh, if you're this tall and you weigh this much, this is exactly how you're going to process alcohol. So, I mean, it depends on how tall you are, how much you weigh, what your muscle mass, if you've got a lot of muscle mass, and how much body weight or body fat you have. When was the last time you ate something? What did you eat? Did you eat, just an apple and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or did you have a really big meal? And then, how does alcohol interfere and interact with those things? So as a general rule for adults, it's I say about an hour per drink. And so I'm not talking about a drink that's half liquor and half, mixer. It's about one 12-ounce beer, about 4 to 6 ounce glass of wine, or a 1 to 2 ounce shot of liquor, or a mixed drink with about 1 to 2 ounces of liquor in it. So that's an hour. And I don't know about you, but most underage parties, someone is not going to wait an hour after they drink a beer. And so that's where you get a lot of the binge drinking. You get a lot of these underage people that are much, much more intoxicated. But also, alcohol doesn't affect teenagers how it does adults. People sometimes just think, oh, well, I'm the same size, I'm the same height, I'm the same weight as this person who's maybe in their 20s or 30s, and so I'm going to be able to drink in the same way that they are. And that's not true at all. And there is no legal amount of alcohol that you can have in your system as someone who's under 21. So I know the 0.08 number gets thrown around a lot, that it's kind of, oh, anything underneath that is safe. Or maybe, you know, oh, if you're 0.01 or 0.02, no, it has to be 0.0. That is the only number of blood alcohol content that you, as someone who is under 21, is allowed to have. So maybe some different things that affect you when you're drinking is it's a depressant. Alcohol does not make you depressed. I mean, it could, I guess, make you depressed, but it's a depressant in that it depresses your brain and motor function. So it slows everything down. So it inhibits your speech. So you have slurred speech. You may not be able to communicate or move your body, or you may trip and fall, things like that. So you aren't as in control of your body as you would if you hadn't been drinking. It also affects your impulse control. So you may do or say things that you wouldn't ordinarily do. So maybe unplanned or unwanted sexual or physical activity, fight. You may get in a car where someone else has been drinking, or you may get behind the wheel of someone who has been drinking, where you wouldn't ordinarily do that. And that's also another thing that we as ALE do. We work what's called source investigations, so if you get behind the wheel and you are in a motor vehicle accident after you've been drinking and you're underage, the North Carolina Highway Patrol will investigate the crash. And if you are under 21 and alcohol is suspected to have been a factor in the crash, then they are actually mandated to contact ALE, and we come out and we essentially trace the source of the alcohol. So where did you get it? How much did you have? Things like that. And so that's also a big part of our job, is figuring out when underage kids have access to alcohol and they drink, or maybe they were intoxicated and they were a passenger and they were injured or anything in that motor vehicle accident. Another way that teenagers are affected by alcohol is sometimes teenagers are less sedated than adults. So alcohol, since it is a depressant, a lot of times it makes people very tired and very sleepy. So an adult may have a couple of beers and then say, well, I'm tired, I'm going to go to bed. But a lot of time teenagers or anyone who's under 21, it doesn't sedate them as well. And so they continue to drink, they continue to stay awake, they continue to binge way longer than someone who is an adult. And so that's how, again, you can have where you are grossly intoxicated and you're much more intoxicated than you might think that you were initially. It also affects your learning and your brain health. So it can interfere with your sleep. You may hear someone say that they passed out for 8 hours. Well, that's not restful 8 hours. That's not good sleep. So you're not actually allowing your body to recover and rest, which is also why it slows your recovery. If you're an athlete, it slows your recovery as far as your muscles and your ability to repair and your body being ready for the next day. So it really inhibits all of that. And it inhibits your ability to regulate stress. So I can't imagine how much stress being a teenager right now. I would never want to go back in time and be in y'all's shoes with social media and all that. But I remember how stressed I was as a teenager in school and family and parents and sports and things like that. So it doesn't allow you to regulate and combat some of that stress and be able to deal with it in a positive way. So those are just some of the things on how alcohol affects your body and your brain as a teenager, and how it can look different than someone who is maybe 5, 10, 15 years older than you. So let's say you are at a party and you've been drinking and you see a friend or someone else at the party who is grossly intoxicated and you feel like they probably need medical assistance, but you don't know what to do. So there's actually something in our laws that tries to encourage people to contact 911 on behalf of someone who is grossly intoxicated. So I have all of the statutes for this, and actually 18B is actually the chapter. If you want to go back and look, if you're a nerd and you want to read more about this, I like learning about it and I like reading about it. So I'm kind of a nerd in that way. But I have all of the general statutes, and so all of the general statutes that have to do with alcohol are in chapter 18B. And so those are all the criminal statutes that have to do with underage drinking and alcohol and anything like that. And so part of that is 18B 302.2, which is the medical treatment and limited immunity. So what that means is if you have been drinking and you're underage and you are helping someone or trying to help someone, or you call 911 in order to help someone who is having either an alcohol overdose, that you can't be charged criminally for that. Now, there is a list of things that you have to, and criteria that has to be met. It's not a 100% get out of jail free card kind of thing, but what it does is it does try to encourage people to look out for people and call 911 and help each other, so that they don't end up, becoming really, really sick, or maybe being sexually assaulted because they're not conscious, or being left outside when it's really, really cold. There's some really, really bad things that can happen to people who are grossly intoxicated and aren't breathing well and aren't able to control themselves. So just keep that in the back of your mind, that there is an option, there is a way that you can help your friend or this other person. Maybe you don't even know that person, but you find them and you want to help them, but you also don't want to get in trouble. So once again, it's not a get out of jail free card, but what it does do is just try to encourage you guys to try to look out for that person and help them if they are really in need of medical assistance. So what do you do if you encounter law enforcement after you've been drinking? That's a really scary thing for a lot of people, especially thinking about going to college, and you've got a lot of university police officers that are there, and ALE, we're around a lot of the universities and colleges and things like that. And the best policy is honesty. And I know that is old school, but it is. So being honest, being humble, and being respectful goes a really long way. I can't guarantee that will 100% make, 100% guarantee that you're not going to get a ticket or anything like that, but it's not just that night. It's also in court in the following weeks. So if you get cited and you get charged with underage drinking or underage consumption, you will have a court date, and that officer can, if you're really disrespectful and you're not helpful and you lie or anything like that, that officer can just say, well, hey, here's the charge, and the court system is going to do what it's going to do. Or they can say they were upfront, they were honest, they were helpful, and they admitted, hey, yep, I've been drinking, I was wrong. Then they can try to go and speak with that DA and try to see if they can help you in any way. So chances are you may think that you're acting really sober and sound sober and look sober, but chances are you probably are not nearly as sober appearing as you think you are. So chances are the officer will probably already know that you've been drinking. And so being honest and upfront is really the best policy. And it's actually within the 18B general statutes that if an officer has probable cause that you are under 21 and that you have been drinking, and they ask you to provide a breath sample for a PBT or anything like that, it's actually part of the statute that you have to do that. So again, just being honest is really the best policy. So I kind of talked about a citation and charge. And so you may say, well, what's the difference? What does it mean? What does it mean to get a ticket? What does it mean to get charged? So to be charged with something is to either be physically arrested or given a citation. So you may say, well, I've been speeding before, I've gotten a citation. Is that the same thing? It's not. So a speeding ticket or, you know, expired registration or something like that is an infraction. And so that you can't go to jail. You can't, it usually is just, it just ends up in a fine, on a court date. But a misdemeanor, which is what, all of the drinking, the underage drinking, charges are actually, you can be arrested for them. Not saying that you would be, but you could be arrested for them because they are a misdemeanor. So it's a criminal offense. They are usually class 1, class 2, or class 3 misdemeanors. And all of those determine, kind of the seriousness of the misdemeanor. So class 3 is kind of your lesser, and then all the way up to class 1. And so depending on your record, depending on if you've been charged with this before, all of that determines kind of the seriousness of kind of the sanctions and kind of the penalties moving forward. But so an infraction is a non-criminal violation of law, not punished by imprisonment. You can only be punished by a fine. So you hear a lot of people that say you've been charged with something versus being convicted. So what's the difference? What's the difference between being charged with something and being convicted with something? Well, being charged is just that. You get handed a ticket. It may be a handwritten ticket. It may be a printed out ticket, and it's that night. And or if you are arrested, physically arrested, you go in front of a magistrate and you're charged. And then the officer has to go before a magistrate, get probable cause, and then you're charged that way. So all of that is just being charged. You've not been convicted with anything up until that point. So then usually a few weeks later, you go to court, and that's when you can potentially be convicted of something. So that's if you are found guilty of whatever you were charged with. And that's done by a judge in court. So you may be saying, well, gosh, what does that mean? What happens if I am convicted, if I am found guilty? And so a couple of things, 18B, the alcohol laws, spells out a few very specific charges that have very specific sanctions. But other than that, once again, it really depends on the court. It depends on your history. If you've been charged with a lot of things beforehand, charged and convicted and found guilty of other things before this, then that may change what the DA decides the sanctions to be if you are found guilty. So if you were charged and convicted of purchasing or attempting to purchase alcohol underage, aiding and abetting an underage person. So aiding and abetting, just a little side note, aiding and abetting is essentially if you can aid and abet someone if you are underage, and you can also aid and abet someone if you are of age. So if you're 21 and your friend is 18 and you go out and buy them alcohol, or you give them alcohol, or you throw a house party and you allow them to come to your house and drink, that's aiding and abetting as an of age person. Now, let's say you and your friend are both 18 and you invite them to your house, get alcohol, things like that. That's aiding and abetting. Someone, you can aid and abet again as an underage person. You can also aid and abet as an of age person. So aiding and abetting an underage person in obtaining alcohol, using a fake ID, allowing someone else to use your ID to buy alcohol. So if you're 21 and you have an of age ID and you allow your little sister or little brother, or a friend who looks like you to use your ID, also that's within this list. And also selling alcohol to an underage person. So if you're charged and convicted of any of those, a conviction report is actually sent to the DMV and your license is revoked for a year. If you are charged and convicted, not just charged, but if you're convicted and found guilty of that, your license will be revoked for a year, and that's by law. So that's not anything that the DA or anybody can say otherwise. It just happens. And you may say, well, selling alcohol to someone, I don't work in a bar, I don't have to worry about that. Well, a sale, just according to the general statutes, is any transfer, trade, or exchange. And so what that means is if you've seen a party where they may sell tickets on Eventbrite, or they may sell cups at the door, or they may sell wristbands or anything like that. And so they may say, well, I didn't sell the alcohol, I just charged people a door fee, or I just charged for wristbands. Well, if they had to make a purchase to come in to the party and have access to alcohol, that constitutes as a sale. So just keep that in mind, is that sale can look different. It doesn't have to necessarily be I'm giving you money and you're giving me alcohol. It can be any kind of exchange or trade or anything that you buy that has any kind of value can be considered a sale. So if you are charged and convicted of selling alcohol to someone who is underage, like kind of what I was talking about, it's a class 1 misdemeanor. You'll have a fine of at least $250, and that's not including your court costs and any kind of lawyer fees that you have, and then at least 25 hours of community service. Now, if you are charged and convicted with that, and that's your punishment, and then within 4 years of that conviction date, you are charged again with something like that, your fine automatically doubles to $500, and you have to do at least 150 hours of community service. So that's automatic if you're within that 4-year window. If you aid and abet an underage person, then that's also a class 1 misdemeanor, and you'll have a fine of at least $500 and at least 25 hours of community service. In the same way, if you get a second conviction of that within 4 years, your fine increases to $1,000, and you'll have at least 150 hours of community service that you'll need to do. So they really, really are taking it seriously in the court system about underage drinking and people giving alcohol, selling alcohol, or providing alcohol to underage people, especially by those who are of age. So if you are almost 21, or you'll be turning 21 in a year or two, these are things to think about, that even though you are of age, you can still, the court demands you to have better judgment, and so that you're not allowing others or providing alcohol to those who are younger and look to you for guidance and as a good role model. A lot of people are concerned about, okay, so what does this mean? I've now been convicted of something, I have to do community service, things like that. And also there are programs, it's not the end of the world. Being charged with an alcohol offense is not the end of the world. A lot of times there are programs, so there's alcohol classes. Some district attorneys, especially in college towns where they have a lot of these type of offenses, there are alcohol courses that you can take. You can do some community service, but you can also, sometimes there are programs where if you don't have any other charges or anything for the next 6 months or the next year, sometimes they do a program where if you pay this fine and you go to this alcohol class and you do this community service, then you don't get any other conviction or charges within the next 6 months or 8 months or year, it just depends, then the case gets automatically dismissed. And so then it would still be, if there was a background check or anything, it would show that you've been charged with something, but it shows that it's been dismissed. And so it doesn't show a conviction or a guilty plea or anything like that. And so that's what a lot of DAs do that, and they try to help out kids that are charged with underage drinking or underage consumption or aiding and abetting, especially if it's your only charge and it's your first offense and things like that, and there's no pattern of you continuing to do this. So you can get into college, you can have a life. It's by no means something that's going to ruin the rest of your life or anything like that. We all make mistakes. We're all young at some point, but it is a law, and it is our job to enforce that and to hold people accountable. And hopefully, if this one citation or this one charge or this one night makes you think twice about it, or makes you a little bit more hesitant to do something like that, or to get into a car with someone who's been drinking, or to go to that party or hang out with that person who may not be the best influence, and that keeps you safe, and that keeps you safer, and that keeps you from being in those car wrecks. It's one of the worst things that I have to do is show up at car wrecks where there's someone who was young and had been drinking and had their whole life ahead of them, and they just made a bad decision. And so that's really one of the worst things that I have to deal with, is seeing that. And so hopefully this citation or this webinar or anything that will maybe change your mind and make you think twice about it, then it's worth it for me. as far as your job. So again, you can get into college, you can have jobs and things like that. It's just if you've been charged and convicted of an alcohol charge or a misdemeanor drug related charge, then you can't work in an ABC licensed establishment for up to 2 years after that conviction date. So if you're planning on waitressing or being a cook or anything like that in a restaurant that sells alcohol, you can't do that if you've been convicted in the last 2 years. So just keep that in mind, that with that conviction, it does limit you as far as a job that you may have been looking at. Other than that, that was really about all that I had. So if anybody has questions or concerns or anything like that, just let me know and I'll kind of open up the floor if you guys want to enter any questions into the chat.
Erin, it looks like Berna has a few questions that she put in the chat. The first one, it says, can't you still drive even if you've had just one drink? One drink doesn't really affect you.
Hang on, let me see if I can pop this open. Okay. So again, one drink, and I go back to that, any amount of alcohol, if you are underage, that's an illegal amount of alcohol. So even if you blow a 0.001, that's still alcohol in your system, and you can have no alcohol in your system. So again, talking about whether it's safe or not, it's not an exact science. And if you have any alcohol in your system, you can be charged. So I would say no. I mean, you can't, even if you don't feel impaired. I think a lot of times younger, whether teenagers or anyone who's underage, may not realize how they're affected, and they may not realize maybe one of their friends has one drink and they seem fine. And so they think, well, I can probably have that same amount and I will seem fine or feel fine. When in reality, you don't realize how slow your reaction time is. You don't realize that you just don't have the motor skills to swerve out of the way of a deer or an oncoming car, or you don't realize how quickly you're going. So you can say, well, maybe I'll be fine after one drink, but you have no idea how it could potentially affect you. And the last thing you want is to have either your friend or an innocent person getting hurt, or yourself getting hurt, and you have to carry that really for the rest of your life. Let's see. It looks like if you're not drinking, but you give your friends a ride home and have to bring the keg in your car, will you get in trouble? So if you are, yeah, so that would be, if it's your car, you are the master of that car. And so anything in that vehicle is your responsibility. So you could be charged. I think it would depend on the circumstances and the all of that, you know, what the officer who stopped you would do. I think it would depend on if were you driving really erratically, kind of what was the reason for the stop. But I think if you are underage and you're found in possession of alcohol, even in whatever capacity that looks like, you can still be charged criminally. When can the conviction come off the record? You can get an expungement. It's very limited though. So, I mean, you can't get everything expunged. You can get just one thing expunged, but you can, and that's through a court order. And usually a lawyer does that. And so they petition the law enforcement agency. So what has happened in the past for me, and most of the time it is for underage drinking offenses, that people just want to kind of wipe the slate clean and, you know, hey, that was something that happened when I was 16, 17, 18 years old, and I'm now 25 and I'm looking at serious jobs and I just want everything off my record. Then they can file for an expungement order, and that's gets sent to us and to the court system, and essentially that court record no longer exists. So any files that we have, any citations, any evidence, anything that we have, it essentially gets wiped from our records. We destroy and shred everything associated with that case. So it completely goes away in the court system, everything. So that's what that looks like if you were to ever get an expungement for something on your record. How do you convince the parents who have parties at their house / cottage because it's safer than having their kids and friends drink and drive? So I've interacted with this a lot, doing these source investigations. And I have seen, so it may not, so there is a criminal side, but there's also a, uh, in it, a liability as well. So criminally, those parents can be criminally charged, because they allowed those kids to drink and to be there and drink and all that kind of stuff. And they may say it's safer. Again, ultimately, they're an adult. I can't make their decisions for them. All I can do is lay out the facts and the potential repercussions, both criminal and civilly. Because what can happen is you can be criminally charged by us or by anybody else. Any other law enforcement officer can criminally charge them for aiding and abetting, for endangering minors. I mean, there's a whole slew of charges that they can have, especially if a kid leaves and gets hurt, even if they're not driving, even if they just walk out into the street or they walk down the road and they trip and fall down a hill or something. I mean, if anyone is injured coming from their home or in their home, or if someone was sexually assaulted in their home because they had been drinking and were not being monitored, the victim, so those kids' parents or those kids' families can actually sue the parents for up to, I want to say it's either 250 or $500,000 as far as civilly. So that has nothing to do with criminal. Even if the criminal case they weren't found guilty, they can also be sued civilly. And so that's also something to think about if your parents are away for the weekend and they weren't even there. I have seen kids that threw house parties at their house, at their parents' house, and a kid left and had been drinking and got in a car wreck, and that child's parents sued the parents for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the parents weren't even there, but because it was their home, and ultimately it's not in the child's name, and so the child can't be held liable for it. It's the parents that are held responsible for that child's hopefully the child didn't die or anything, but if they were fatally injured, any funeral things, costs, medical bills, things like that. So it's really scary, and it can get really, 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 really dicey very quickly. So again, just best practice is not to have a party. And those parents, again, they're adults. I can't tell them what to do or not to do with their own children, but I can just try to lay out what can potentially happen and what unfortunately does usually happen. How do you talk to youth to deter them from taking their first drink? Well, I can't, for that, I think it really depends on the kid, because I think we're all curious and we all make mistakes. What I do try to do is try not to, it's kind of a judgment-free zone. So I understand kids are young and they make mistakes, but I try to just lay out the facts as much as possible. I don't try to scare anyone. I don't try to do that, because I have found that doesn't really help. But if people can see the facts and they can see what really happens, and it's not something that is going to happen at somebody else's school, or that would never happen to my family, or that would never happen to me, that it can and it does happen. And I don't want to go to your parents' house and knock on their door at 2 o'clock in the morning and tell them that you've been in an accident, or for your mom to have been texting and calling you all night and have no idea where you are. And it's because you're passed out, or you're in the hospital or something like that, and they don't even know. So that's really, I just try to lay that out as much as possible, and I try to be honest, and I try to show people what the repercussions are. And for one evening of fun or one evening of drinking, you can change the rest of your life. I don't want anyone to have to go to their friend's funeral while they're in high school. I hope you never have to experience that, but the fact of the matter is that it happens, and that kids really do get hurt, and it's not always in a car. I have worked investigations where kids just walked in front of out into the street. I've worked investigations where they just were walking, they were outside, they were in a field. And so again, one might say, oh, well, that's safe. They're just on someone else's property and they're hanging out, they're at a bonfire. But then unfortunately that child was left alone and they were not able to breathe because of how much alcohol they had, and they died. So just things like that. I just try to lay out as many facts as possible and be realistic about what can potentially happen. And it's not just 1 in a million or once in a blue moon. It happens all the time. Is it a big deal to use a fake ID? Yes. So you can be charged even if you don't even have. So like we talked about before, it's a class 1 misdemeanor. And so all of those fines, and you can have your driver's license, if you're convicted of that, you can have your driver's license revoked for a year. You can be charged if you give someone else your fake ID to use, or you use a fake ID, even if you are attempting to enter a bar. So maybe you haven't even walked up to the bar yet. You just tried to enter the door with a fake ID, you can be charged with that. So even just attempting to use it can have criminal repercussions. Discuss how it's still possible for juveniles or anyone to be charged with DUI or DWI, even if parked sitting in a vehicle after drinking. So interestingly enough, ALE agents don't do a whole lot of DWI arrests because that's actually a driving offense and it's not an alcohol offense. And so highway patrol, that's their bread and butter. That's what they do. But I do know that sometimes sitting in a vehicle with your with it cranked, so with the engine on, and sleeping. I know people that have parked to sleep it off, and they think that that's kind of the safest bet. But the best thing to do is to if you have been drinking, don't even get in your car at all. Don't get in a car at all. Try to stay where you are and sleep, or call someone, or call Uber, or call a friend or a family member or something like that to come pick you up. Don't try to drive a little bit and then try to sleep it off, or park or anything like that, because even if you pull off onto the side of the road, there's dangers in getting hit. And also if the keys are in the ignition, then you can be charged with a DWI. But I would have to go back and look specifically at the statutes as far as what exactly, the parameters of if the vehicle is on the roadway or off the roadway or things like that. But I do know that if the keys are in the ignition, even if it's in park, even if you're in a parking spot, that's something that you can be. It's the intent of driving that in court has also played out as far as being charged and convicted of a DWI. What should they do if they were pressured into having a drink and knowing they cannot drive? That's a really tough one, especially in a group setting, especially being a teenager. Again, all of us were teenagers at one point. We know what peer pressure looks like. We know, what it's like to not want to be weird, or not want to stand out, or not want to say the wrong things. But I think the best thing, blame it on us. Whatever you need to do to get yourself out of that situation, say, I don't want to get stopped. It's my mom's car, or she doesn't let me, drive anyone that's not family, or whatever. Whatever you need to say to get yourself out of that situation, because the best thing to do is to not get in the car, not be pressured. And again, there's Uber, there's Lyft. I mean, there's all kinds of different resources. But even as much as we don't want to or wouldn't want to, is calling mom or dad and getting yourself out of that situation, because a tough conversation for mom and dad is going to be infinitely better than getting in a wreck, getting arrested, having mom and dad come and pick you up from the hospital, having mom and dad come and pick you up from jail. All of that is worse than maybe getting grounded, maybe getting your phone taken away, or peer pressure, or anything like that. Not having the responsibility, or not having the weight of someone else's injury, a friend's injury or death because you were driving and getting in a vehicle accident, not having that on your shoulders. If you as a parent pick your child up from a party and they have consumed alcohol and you get pulled over on the way home, can you as a parent get in trouble, or the child themselves? So I think you can look at the letter of the law and you can look at the intent of the law. And this is just Erin speaking, so I don't want to speak for every single law enforcement officer out there. But I think if I pulled someone over, or interacted with a mom or dad and their underage kid was drinking and it's 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and I can tell that mom or dad is furious or not happy that they're having to come and pick their daughter or their son up from an underage party, I'm not gonna, that's not a citation or anything like that I'm going to want to do, because I just want to let that mom or that dad take that kid home and get them in bed and just know that they're safe and healthy and okay. That's not the time for a citation or anything like that. So for me, I would never want to punish a parent or get them in trouble for just coming and picking up their kid and making sure that their kid was safe. And I wouldn't want to punish that child for really doing the right thing and not getting in a car, or not driving a car or anything like that. Is that kid made the right decision, called their parent, got picked up, and so again, you can make bad decisions, but if you stop making bad decisions and you make a good decision, I don't want to. That's not something that I want to punish. I'm just glad that that kid is safe and they're with their mom or dad, or a family member or a friend, and they're ultimately safe. Well, again, I'm happy I can give Heather and my email address. I know that she's got it, and so I think that there will be a link of this that will be sent out later, and so my email address will be in that. And if you have additional questions, or maybe you didn't think about something until later, feel free to shoot me an email. I'd be happy to talk or happy to answer any kind of questions.